The HJC RPHA 70 was one of the most popular sport touring helmets of all time. Then came the RPHA 71, safer, more modern, but also heavier. And that is precisely why so many riders have remained loyal to the old 70 right up to the present day. Now, the Korean manufacturer has unveiled its new RPHA 72 Carbon. It is lighter, slimmer, and according to HJC, once again, closer to everything that made the RPHA 70 so popular back then. These days, a sport touring helmet has to do absolutely everything. It needs to offer comfort over long distances, peace and quiet on the motorway, stability at speed, space for communication systems, and of course, an integrated sun visor. And while doing all of that, it should preferably not look like a moving box. That is precisely where the new RPHA 72 comes in. The first thing you notice is just how dynamic it looks. It is slim, compact, and even sportier than you would normally expect from a traditional sport touring helmet. The ventilation openings are neatly integrated. The carbon structure beneath the clear coat looks high quality, and all the panel gaps are consistent. The visor mechanism feels precise. Overall, the helmet leaves a very premium impression, although that is something you are entitled to expect in this price bracket. But looks alone do not earn any points. So let us turn to the things that really matter in everyday use. And that brings us straight to the first surprise, the interior lining. You can tell that somebody has genuinely thought about this, particularly when it comes to the way the padding is secured. Anyone who rides a lot knows the problem. You're constantly taking the helmet off and putting it back on, and sooner or later something shifts out of place. A cheek pad comes loose, or the inner lining no longer sits properly. With the RPHA 72, that simply does not happen. Everything clicks firmly into place, and everything stays exactly where it belongs. The fit also surprised me in a very positive way. The helmet sits snugly around the head without pressing uncomfortably anywhere. The cheek pads make clean, even contact and give you a reassuring sense of stability right from the very beginning. At the same time, you never get that unpleasant feeling that your head is trapped in a vise. On longer rides in particular, you quickly find out whether a helmet really fits properly or not. Even after several hours in the saddle, I did not experience any uncomfortable pressure points, and that is by no means something you can take for granted. With my long oval head shape, I have suffered quite badly in a number of helmets before. But now we come to the most important point, the weight. Because this is exactly where the previous model lost a lot of fans. In size medium, the new RPHA 72 weighs exactly 1,404 grams, saving roughly 150 grams compared with its predecessor. At first, that might not sound like a particularly dramatic amount, but out on the road, it makes a clearly noticeable difference. That is especially true over longer distances. You notice it even more strongly when you turn your head for a shoulder check. The helmet feels light and neutral, and it creates hardly any sense of inertia. In fact, that was one of the things I noticed immediately. It becomes particularly obvious on winding country roads, where you are moving your head constantly from one corner to the next. And that is exactly where the helmet plays to its strengths, on fast sections, on the motorway, and during longer tours. Because by the end of a full day in the saddle, a light helmet makes a genuinely significant difference. And now things become interesting. Low weight on its own is still not enough. A light helmet that is noisy or becomes unstable is no use to anyone. So how does the RPHA 72 perform in the wind? That is exactly what we tested, using the Ducati Monster, the Ducati Diavel, and a very healthy dose of wind pressure. Both bikes are almost a worst-case test for a helmet. There is very little wind protection, plenty of turbulence, and direct airflow hitting the helmet. Under precisely these conditions, you very quickly discover whether the aerodynamics really work. And they do work. The helmet remains pleasantly stable. There is no irritating oscillation and no nervous tugging at your head. Even at higher speeds, everything stays calm, composed, and neutral. That strongly suggests that HJC has done a genuinely good job with the aerodynamics. However, the result is not absolutely perfect. The wind-blocking flaps around the lower edge of the helmet are slightly tricky at first. When you put the helmet on or take it off, they make it feel a little tighter and narrower than it actually is because the flaps brush quite firmly over your ears and cheeks. They do so more noticeably than on other helmets. It is not a major problem, and after a short while, you get used to it. But when you first try the helmet, it is definitely something you notice. In return, these flaps help seal the helmet neatly and keep the wind away from the interior around the lower edge. Noise levels are also good overall, However, the RPHA 72 Carbon is not the quietest touring helmet money can buy. Naturally, a lightweight sport touring helmet with a carbon shell is never going to turn into a whisper-quiet helmet. Anyone looking for absolute silence will still want to use earplugs. In normal, everyday riding, however, there is very little reason for criticism. That said, riders who mainly cover long motorway stretches and want the highest possible level of quiet should keep this point in mind. The ventilation also made a positive impression. On warm days in particular, you can clearly feel air reaching your head. The upper intakes work well, and the chin vent also does exactly what it is meant to do. With all the vents fully open, however, noise levels rise a little. We have to be honest about that. Even on the motorway, though, the system remains pleasantly unobtrusive. There is no annoying whistling and no excessive draft. That is exactly how it should be. Then there are the familiar touring features. You get an integrated sun visor, a Pinlock visor to prevent misting, tool-free visor removal, and a clever discrete preparation for communication systems. In other words, everything you would expect from a modern helmet is present and correct. On top of that, the sun visor covers an enormous field of vision. It does require a little effort to operate though, and it drops down in a slightly clumsy fashion. That is certainly not a deal breaker, but it is a small detail that you notice in everyday use. By contrast, the clear main visor makes an excellent impression in every respect. The mechanism operates smoothly and feels high quality. It clicks precisely into position and it seals completely. Nothing feels cheap, loose or rattly. Taken as a whole, the helmet and all its features feel like one coherent, well-judged package. And then, of course, there is the carbon. The finish is genuinely clean. The exposed carbon weave looks high quality, and the paintwork is equally convincing. As soon as you pick the helmet up and handle it, you quickly realize that it clearly belongs in the premium segment without its price going completely through the roof. In plain carbon, the recommended retail price is €559.90. In carbon with graphics, as tested here, it is €599.90. So, who is the HJC RPHA 72 Carbon for? In my opinion, the answer is very clear. It is for riders who want a particularly sporty touring helmet. It is for people who cover long distances. It suits riders of naked bikes, sport touring bikes, and powerful cruisers. And of course, it is for everyone who still misses the RPHA 70, because the new RPHA 72 fills precisely that gap remarkably well. There are, however, a few smaller points of criticism. It is not the quietest touring helmet, the sun visor could be a little easier to operate, and the wind-blocking flaps around the bottom require a short period of familiarization. Overall, though, the RPHA 72 Carbon delivers a very strong combination of low weight, stability, build quality, fit and sporty styling. All of those qualities come together in a convincing overall package. And that is it from us once again. Thank you very much for watching. If this performance check gave you something useful, please leave us a thumbs up and put your questions, suggestions or complaints down in the comments below. What I'm most interested to hear is this. What have your experiences been with the RPHA 72, the 71 or the old 70? Put them in the comments below. Thank you, take care and see you next time.